Yeah, we're now recording.
Excellent, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Do please bear with us if there are any technical issues. The minutes will be posted on our website as usual. In terms of housekeeping, we've updated the rules on Zoom this evening to make more use of the blue hand, so I would ask that you all please listen carefully. For participants, if all participants, that's councillors and staff and those who are presenting, please make sure you are on mute unless you're invited to speak. If participants want to comment or ask a question, please use the electronic raised hand by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll do my best to do this in turn. In the same way, I will ask respondents to reply. Will all participants please not repeat a point that's already been made, and please ensure all discussion is through the chair. If councillors wish to make amendments to any recommendations that are existing, they need to propose that amendment, and another councillor would then need to second that proposal before it went to a vote. I may need to end the discussion and go to a vote if time is short, and if the meeting looks like it will exceed 90 minutes, I will call for a short break before continuing the meeting. Will councillors please vote using the blue hand so that the vote can be recorded by Paul, our town clerk. If further discussion is required by myself and Paul, we will go into a breakout room to agree the next steps. In terms of attendees, we've currently got 10 attendees registered today. Please can I ask attendees to pose questions through the Q&A board initially. If you won't be on video, but you can be seen in name by councillors and staff, and attendees' names will become visible on the questions board for the record if their question is answered. If you're not comfortable with that, then please send your questions to info@froomtowncouncil.gov.uk after the meeting. I will then ask Rachel for any moderated questions. In terms of staff, as usual, Paul will clerk this evening and Laura will be taking the minutes and managing slides. Rachel and Sarah will manage the questions board and participant settings. We are currently live streaming via our YouTube channel this evening, and Becky will also be tweeting live updates. So with that out of the way, the first item on the agenda for this evening is apologies for absence, declaration of councillors' interests and approval of the minutes from the last meeting on the 5th of August. Paul, do we have any apologies other than the ones that we've been notified of?
No, we haven't apologies. I haven't been notified of any, so I don't think we have. Has anyone come directly to you, Andy?
No, none that I know of.
No apologies.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. So in that case, can I take any declaration of councillors' interest, please?
I should just say I'm a trustee of Friends of the River Froome. Sue's presenting for them, so it's just an interest, or as a trustee, non-pecuniary.
Fantastic, thanks, Rich. And then finally, we will need to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Those have obviously been published. So could I ask for a councillor to propose those, please? That's John, and a councillor to second, Rich. So can I ask all councillors in favour of agreeing those to please raise your electronic blue hands if possible?
Can you see my hand, Paul?
Yes, we can, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've got Sarah's struggling, but she's got her hand up. Is that right? Good stuff. Anita, are you struggling? I think
I haven't got a hand either. Well, I have, but not a blue one.
Okay. So I think that's unanimous.
That looks unanimous, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So no need to ask for against or abstentions. Fantastic. So in that case, we'll take item number 2 on the agenda, which is questions and comments from the public and councillors. So as usual, we will start that off with anything from Froome Town councillors, please.
So Mark Norrington.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I've had a resident contact me, pleased with the work that's been finished in the town centre. Everything's flowing a lot better. Unfortunately, with that brings another problem, that everything is flowing a lot better, and things are travelling a lot quicker through the town centre. I mean, for the last 2 years now, we've had a 20-mile-an-hour limit, which this resident is particularly upset, seems to be being ignored. Do we know, or can we ask, if there will be any enforcement of that, or any reminder that just because you can get through the town a lot quicker doesn't mean that you have to go a lot quicker, and you still have to stick the 20 miles an hour. So should we contact police or Ashley Ray and his mobile speed gun to try and send some messages on this?
Andy, could I?
Yes, Paul.
Yeah, yeah. It's a fair point. What I'll do, Mark, I'll take that back to the police and ask their opinion on whether it's possible to arrange some enforcement, and through them I'll look at the local Speedwatch group as well.
Thank you. Have I got any other questions or comments from Frome Town Councillors, please?
Rob Collett's got a blue hand up.
Brilliant. Yeah, Rob, please.
Nope, he's just need to take it down, Rob.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Fantastic. Right, I will then throw that out to any questions or comments from district councillors present, if there are, please. Rachel.
John Clark would like to speak.
Sorry, Rachel, who was that?
John Clark.
Okay,
John Clark.
yeah, if you could add John Clark, please.
Oh, good evening. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the question, really. The Town Council should be aware, because I have certainly raised it, as has Martin Dimmery, I think last time being last night at the meeting. Is the Town Council making active applications to the Somerset County Council Climate Emergency Fund of £1 million? This is an ideal opportunity to pursue and look at potential projects for Frome, and it would be a real opportunity lost if the Town Council is not currently looking at an application or planning to make an application. Could I have an answer to that question? Thank you.
Peter, if you'd like to respond.
Yes, we're working on an application. Thanks, John and Martin, indeed, for advising us about the opportunity. Amongst the things we'll be looking at is the possibility of raising funding for a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, but we will look at the other possibilities. So yes, we will be doing that.
Good news. Thank you very much. Also, Chair, it's not a question, it's a comment. It's an update on something. Can I give that now?
Feel free, John.
Okay, let me find it. So at previous meetings, I think the Town Council has asked about Mendip response to funding for COVID monies. And I've approached Richard Bates, who's the Finance Officer for Mendip District Council, the last time being 2 weeks ago. And I approached him today as well. And what he has advised me to say is this: Cabinet will be agreeing the governance arrangements next Monday, which will allow them to decide how they can support the claims received. So I just wanted to pass that on to the Town Council in terms of where that's at, and perhaps after Monday there will be some resolution to the question about funding, which I hope Town Councils and other parishes councils will receive. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm sure we'll all appreciate some good news coming out of that, so thank you very much. Have we got any other district councillors at this point who'd like to ask any questions or make any comments, please?
Not at the moment, by the look of it.
Fantastic. So then the last thing would be if there are any county councillors who would like to say anything at this stage. And it looks like John would like to speak again. No? Okay, brilliant. All right, thanks, John. Excellent. Okay, well, in that case, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is item number 3, which is
Andy, sorry, there's probably some more questions from the public at this point.
Sorry, I do apologise. Yes. Do we have any questions from the public?
Yes, we do. Our first question is from Jane. Hello, Jane. Would you like to ask a question?
I had 2 questions. One is what has happened to the St Alban shields, please? And the other one is what has happened to the rather attractive guards that were put round the oak trees in front of the library. They've disappeared, and they were beautiful. They were made by different artists, local artists, I think. Thank you. Anybody know the answers?
Thanks, Jane.
I can answer the first question.
Thank you.
The shields are safe and in our possession. They're actually safely kept by the Town Council. Subject to the agreement of councillors, a public artwork incorporating those shields will be investigated in the context of next year's work programme, and that will allow those iconic signs to continue to be used in the central part of the town. So we will bring forward some proposals in due course, subject to agreement of councillors.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Paul?
Yeah, I've got an answer to Jane's question about the tree guards. Hi, Jane. Haven't seen or heard you for lovely to hear you and all that.
Can't get rid of me that easily.
Thank goodness. Yeah, the space outside the library where the trees are that you're talking about is owned by the district council. And I've asked Chris Stringer today to get in contact with them to find out where they'd gone. He thinks that they were removed because the tree guards were growing in. Sorry, the trees were going into the tree guards, so they had to be removed. But he's not positive on that. But he will come back to you directly once he gets an answer from them.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Rachel?
So we have another resident question from Paul Mallet. Paul, if you'd like to ask your question.
Sorry, Rachel, I'm struggling to hear you.
Rachel said inviting Paul Mallet to ask his question.
Yeah, please do.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello, Paul. Yes, yeah. Paul, we can. Please carry on.
I actually wrote in and I was inquiring. I live in Willow Vale, and the proposal to have a bridge across to the Saxon Vale development rather disturbs us, because I'm afraid the question I asked was misinterpreted. I was asking what will happen to people like myself who park their car in Willow Vale, and if a bridge suddenly is built, it's going to obviously reduce the parking for us. At the moment, we're fighting against estate agents and shoppers and various people who park in the road anyway. And a number of us would even be prepared to pay parking permits, which I appreciate, which would need monitoring by a traffic warden, whatever. I just wondered what the alternative might be, because the bridge, in fact, is being built, or proposed to be built, sort of next door to where we are. We're in the tarmac bit, if you like, because the rest of the road, as you probably appreciate, is unmade and therefore is a private road, or private part of the road. So that was my question. And furthermore, there are obviously going to be some trees taken down, which is unfortunate, of course, but really would like to know a little bit more about this.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, would you like to respond?
Yeah, and I emailed you back this afternoon, Paul, and indeed we got the wrong end of the stick on that.
Yes.
So apologies for that. And as I said in my email to you earlier, our planning manager, Jane Llewellyn, isn't around this evening. She's unable to attend. But what I'll do, I'll get her to go straight back to you, hopefully tomorrow or at least by Friday, to sort of have a chat through that with you, and just so we can understand what your point is very clearly, and she will be able to answer it, or at least take it away and provide an answer for you. Is that okay?
Yes, thanks, Paul.
All right.
Thank you. John, did you want to come in on that?
Lower hand. Yeah, no, I just wanted to know if we were talking about a footbridge that's proposed. It's not a car bridge, it's a footbridge. Is that correct?
That's right.
And cyclists as well, of course.
Yes, yes, indeed, Paul.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent. Is that all we have, Rachel, for questions? Fantastic, thank you. Okay. In that case, then we will now take item number 3 on the agenda, which is a short presentation from Sue Everett with an update on recent events and happenings along the River Frome. So, Sue, over to you.
Sue, you've got your mute on still.
Is that better?
Yes, marvellous.
Okay, there's a couple of my slides missing. I'm not quite sure where they've gone. Anyway, I hope it's all come through. There should be a title slide. Should be a title slide and one for the river strategy.
Bear with just 2 seconds. Yes, hang on, let me switch slides.
Oh, good. Okay, right, thank you for inviting me here today. So I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the River Frome, which is a local organisation that works very closely with the Town Council on a number of matters, and an increasing number of them. I'm one of 11 members of Friends of the River Frome that sits on the management group. And between us, we've got quite a wide range of expertise. We've got engineers, hydrologists. I'm an ecologist. We've got people who are expertise in planning, landscape, community consultation. Next slide, please. So the Town Council adopted the Frome River strategy in June, and the broad aims of that strategy are to improve the river environment for people and nature, and to enable environmentally sensitive access where that's feasible. Next slide. So why do we need to heal our river? So, I mean, it's now official that our river is in poor condition. And my involvement with Friends of the River Frome stems from my concern about the ecological quality of the river. And it's actually deteriorated since I've lived here, and I moved here 8.5 years ago. Before, in 2014, it was considered in moderate condition, which isn't good, but now it's poor. And this is largely due to pollution from agricultural sources. And it's also failing on some chemicals as well, which you probably never heard of. One called PBDE, which is a flame retardant, and mercury. I think many of Britain's rivers are in the same situation. Next slide. So the agricultural pressures are largely related to intensive livestock farming and poor nutrient nutrient management. And this is the cause of the 2 recent serious pollution incidents, one of which was literally within the last few weeks. There are laws that are meant to prevent such pollution that were introduced 3 years ago, but they're consistently broken, and the Environment Agency is failing to enforce them. On the good news side, we now actually have a multi-benefit project that started on the 1st of September to work with farmers and landowners and to help them to reduce the practices that are causing these issues. It's funded by the Environment Agency. And we've also got a new farmer landowner group that started up in April. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has prevented us having the field meetings that we need to have, which are actually crucial to getting the message across. And we've had 1 online meeting only so far. Okay, next slide. So this is particular interest to the town, which is the pressure related to sewage, human sewage, entering the river, which it does frequently. So we've got an old drainage system, and we've got many illegal misconnections and individuals and businesses dumping polluting substances into the surface water drainage system. And probably both related to the livestock sewage and the human sewage, we know that young people who swam in the river this year got sick. It is unfit to play or swim in. So Friends of the River Frome, we have got a group of 3 of us to look into this issue of sewage overflows. What we know is that Wessex Water now has monitoring on all of them, and this map is available online, and it was produced because of a Freedom of Information request by The Guardian a couple of months ago and the Rivers Trust. So we now have a map showing all of the sewage discharge points for the whole of England. And as you can see, the one in the town centre overflowed 50 times for 130 hours in 2019. And our river friend Fergal Sharkey actually provided us with the information that in 2019, Wessex Water spent a total of 411 hours on 385 separate occasions dumping sewage into the stretch of the river that runs through town. If you could just click on the YouTube video, there's a very, very brief YouTube video of that sewer running in June. Are you able to run that video? No?
Did it not show to you?
No. We actually have got it online. I set up a Friends of the River Frome YouTube channel, and you can see it on there. I've actually got one that's closer as well, but I haven't put that online yet. Anyway, basically we've got raw sewage going into the middle of the river. I've asked the question, does our MP know? And perhaps it's time for a joint letter between Frome Town Council and Friends of the River Frome. Although I've just been made aware that there are other partners working on a sewage strategy for Frome. So we need to find out what is going to happen about that. Okay, next slide. Just going back to the sewage overflows, I think it would be really good for for the town council to give support to remediate the issues that we have with raw sewage going in the river. That would mean fairly significant investment on the part of Wessex Water to upgrade the drainage system. That is needed, and I'm not sure if people are aware, but there was raw sewage coming out of the the manhole at the top of Catherine Street quite recently. So anything like that needs to be reported. I'm just going to hone in on the Dippy now, because that's a really good example of what's happening. There's been many reported pollution cases just going into that little watercourse, which is at most 2 kilometres long. At least part of it is above ground, so we can see what's going in. There have been numerous misconnections, and there's some Wessex water sewer overflows in there as well. The whole thing is unsafe, unsightly, and it's impermeable, so water moves fast into the river. So it's a really good example of the problems faced by an urban watercourse, but also where we can work together to improve it. So already Frome Town Council, the Wild Trout Trust, Friends of the River Frome have got together, got the funding, and we've got a feasibility study to rewild it. And now there's a bid being put together. Richard and Mike Bull from Friends of the River Frome are working together on that to get a bid together for funding to actually implement the feasibility study plan that was produced. We're also waiting to hear from Wessex Water about how they're going to deal with the combined sewer overflows that go into it, because key to rewilding the Dippy is to remove those sewage inputs into it. And just to demonstrate how unsafe it is, my friend Dave, he lives at the end of the culvert, and he's seen at least half a dozen kids end up in the culvert as they come down the path on their skateboards. And over the 40 years he's lived there, he's seen many animals end up in it and often die in it, including a horse at one point. Okay, next slide. So flooding, this is a priority project to address flooding and flood risk to Frome. It's a priority project for the Somerset Frome Catchment Partnership. Now the Catchment Partnership is a large number of organisations with an interest in the river and its catchment, from the Environment Agency to Wessex Water, Frome Town Council, Friends of the River Frome, Mendip Council, Somerset Flood Authority, and so on. So it's only been in existence for about 18 months, but it's a really good networking organisation. And the project it's now to focus on upstream natural flood management interventions. And I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. So we now have a project officer called Ali Morgan, and she began on the 1st of September. And her project is being coordinated by the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group Southwest. And obviously farmers and landowners are also key players in delivering these interventions. Next slide. So natural flood management is about slowing the flow. It's about reducing the speed and volume of water coming off land into the river upstream of Frome. So that's going to involve better land management, restoring wetlands, interrupting flow pathways with new wetlands, trees, and so on. There are many possibilities. And initially, we have commissioned some hydrogeomorphological studies, and they've been completed. These have identified the locations for interventions upstream. Also, over the last 5 years, the Bristol Avon Rivers Trust have been doing catchment walkover surveys to identify where there are particular issues that need to be addressed. So the project will involve a range of organisations and consultants, including the Rivers Trust. And one of the farms that I'm advising on is going to be probably one of the first sites for what we call a stage zero river management intervention, which means that we're going to take out the main channel of a stream and allow the water to percolate over the landscape. And at a later date, it would be really good to arrange a field meeting so that people could see some of these things in the flesh. So that one is going to start work hopefully next summer. Next slide. So citizen science monitoring, that's something that Friends of the River Frome is becoming involved with, and it's part of national and regional schemes run by the Rivers Trusts. We're looking forward to more sophisticated testing coming on stream that's going to allow the detection of sewage, and that will be something really like involvement from Frome Town Council with. We will be probably needing a little bit of funding because the lab testing will be a bit more expensive. But anyway, watch this space on that, and obviously Rich will be kept in the loop as a member of Friends of the River Frome. But rolling out citizen science monitoring is, you know, is a great thing, and already with the annual water blitz testing, we're being able to participate in getting a bigger picture of the state of our rivers. Okay, next slide. So river barriers are a big issue for both the quality of the river in terms of its biological status and also the way it operates in a whether it's natural or not natural. And the barriers such as Welsh Mill Weir provide a significant impediment to migratory fish, for example. So there has been a feasibility study completed on actually either removing it or modifying it. The preferred option is to modify it. Again, it's a costly exercise, so any action on that requires funding. Next slide. As many of you know, well, there's a fair few access projects which either have been delivered or are being planned in conjunction with Frome Town Council. These are just a few of the examples, and the gentleman earlier on mentioned the footbridge as well from Saxon Vale to Willow Vale. So that's another one where members of Friends of River Frome are being involved with advice and so on. Next slide. So planning, obviously that's a big issue here, and Friends of River Frome offers comments to the planning authority where the river's likely to be affected, and these are the issues which concern us and which we will provide comment upon. So I mean, the planning is obviously critical in delivering the vision for improving the river environment. And we need to look at planning in the whole. Okay, next slide. I mean, obviously this is the biggest one on the radar at the moment, with massive implications for flooding, the river, and many of the other issues, obviously, that Frome Town Council is concerned about. At the moment, we haven't issued any official comments upon it, but will do when the application comes in. So, next slide, please. So I'm hoping now that the only way for the river is up. There are many challenges, but our river is at a very low point. But now we do have some funding for initiatives and projects to start making a difference. And Frome Town Council's continued support with all these matters will continue to be most welcome and essential. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you very much, Sue. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Sue, please? Paul, please.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. councillors, would it be reasonable to make the assumption that you would support me writing a letter on your behalf with Sue complaining about the pollution to the MP and Wessex Water? Yeah, okay, will do. Sue, can we get together and draft something?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Fantastic. Right, so I have four hands raised on the system, so I will go in order. Anita, please.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Sue. That was really insightful. That was a really interesting presentation. Thank you. One of the things I just wanted to ask you was, you mentioned about mercury in the river. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you identify it? And do you have any idea where that comes from?
I don't really know much about that in terms of its origin. It could be from electronics. I have no idea. Like many river valleys, there are old waste tips everywhere. So I can tell you that I can tell you where two of them are. There's one that is above Watcombe Fields on the old below the old TH White site. That is leaching horrible orange gunk. Goodness knows what was in there. And that gunk is possibly eventually finding its way into the river because it's ending up in a small watercourse. So that's one. The other one I'm aware of is at Witham Friary, and it's Witham. Yes, it's just as you on the road just before you get to Witham, next to one of the big farms there, Witham Manor Farm, I think. And again, what on earth was in there? Who knows? We've got a massive legacy of junk dumped in holes in the ground without any containment.
It is very disturbing how much gets thrown into the river, I must say. Yeah, but thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Anita and Sue. So next I'll go to Steve and then John and then Rob, please.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Sue. With regards to the Selwood Garden community plan, Sue, obviously there's going to be an awful lot of consultation on that. I think it would be great if Friends of the River Froome were up for it to, once you've come up with your thoughts on it, to actually give the planning committee at Froome Town Council a presentation on what you think the implications of that development will have to the river, where it meets the river, but also further downstream. Maybe we could talk about that at some stage, in the next few weeks and arrange something.
I'll raise that with the next committee meeting, Steve. Thank you.
And so then John and then Rob, please.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Sue. I think it's really brilliant, all the work that you've all been doing and are doing. And of course, I support the letter to the MP. And I think it's just on the point about sewage detection that you mentioned, and that Froome Town Council could support that. I mean, from my point of view, it's about the visibility also for people into Froome, because I think what you tell us about the water quality, a lot of people in Froome don't really understand that and don't know that. And I think we would like to mobilize more support, so also people to understand the risks associated with the sort of sewage outfall. So I would support us as a council, maybe in a future meeting quite soon, to actually try to approve a small sum of money to support that water quality testing, so that we could, and having that visible for people in town, so they could understand exactly what the reality is. And the testing will be helpful anyway in the guide to planning. It would be a great way to mobilize public support. But thank you all for all your effort.
Thanks, John. Sorry, and then Rob, please.
Thanks, Sue, Andy, and thank you very much for your presentation, Sue. It's very reassuring to have people like yourself obviously very much on the case. I'm just wondering, do you have any sort of, I don't know how to exactly put this, but connections with people upriver or downriver or other parishes, or do you have a sort of kind of policy of trying to draw people in from wider catchment area than just the river that passes through the parish of Froome?
In terms of the actual Friends of the River Froome, it hasn't really put itself about much. and I think that's something that needs to be remedied. We do, now there is the farmer landowner group, so we're not leading on that, that's the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, so they are hopefully trying to put some of the messages across, but it is quite limited. But the 2 new projects that have just been funded, they should be doing a lot of legwork in talking to landowners and farmers, both in terms of natural flood management and reducing pollution. So hopefully the messages about the need to address challenges to the river will be going out to a lot more people.
It strikes me that this is one particular area that perhaps Froome Town Council could collaborate with other parish councils.
I think that would be a very good idea. I did actually put a link to this meeting on the Witham Friary webpage, Facebook page tonight, just in case anybody from there was interested.
Excellent, thank you. And then Andy, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thanks, Sue. Pardon my ignorance, but how does sewage end up in the river? And I'm assuming that that's not a normal practice at all.
Well, it is pretty normal in most towns and cities because we've got a lot of inherited Victorian antiquated drainage systems. So when there's a lot of rain, there isn't the capacity to take the sewage from your toilets and washing machines and sinks, which should go in one pipe, separated from the surface runoff from the roofs and roads in another. And what happens is basically they meet, and when there's a lot of rain, the raw sewage ends up in the surface water drainage system. And this is extremely common in towns and cities because of this inherited ancient drainage system that we all have. I mean, in London, they're investing in something called the Thames Tideway Tunnel to deal with that, where they're going to store all the sewer overflows until the rain stops and it can go through the sewage works.
Excellent, thank you for that. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was actually sewage works intentionally pumping this out on the sly, or whether it was something more like what you said. But yeah, thank you.
It's probably a bit of that as well.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right, thank you very much. Rachel, do we have any questions or comments from the public?
Yes, we do. We have a question from Helen Kay. Helen, I'll just, there we are. You should be able to speak now, Helen.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just wondered, Sue, if you could tell me a bit more about this new group that's looking at a sewage strategy. Who's on it? Hopefully Wessex Water. And as you mentioned earlier, the Selwood Garden development is going to have a huge impact. And there's also the ones that already allocated, the land already allocated to the south of Froome, that is, they are all planning to pump their sewage back up to the main sewage link. And I'm just wondering if that's the sort of thing that you're going to be looking at, about whether we could have a more sort of comprehensive, particularly if we are going to, the town is going to expand, way of dealing with the sewage. Thank you.
The answer to that is I don't know.
Okay.
And we do have a meeting of the Somerset Froome Catchment Partnership Steering Group coming up. I think it's in November. I'm not quite sure whether we will learn anything else about it then or not.
Can you say that again? The Somerset what? Somerset Catchment?
Somerset Froome Catchment Partnership Steering Group.
Somerset Froome Catchment Partnership Steering Group. Okay, thank you.
Helen, Mendip are represented on that group. Is it Carol Taylor, I think, who's part of that?
Who? Carol?
Is it Carol Taylor? I'm sure that's her name, but it might not be offhand.
Caroline Murray.
Caroline Murray, thank you.
She's a consultant to Mendip.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll try and get hold of her. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other questions?
Yes, we've got a question from Michael Dunk. Michael, you should be able to speak now.
Is Mick on the panel now?
He should be.
Go ahead, Mick. You're on mute at the moment, though.
Sorry, it doesn't work on full screen. Okay. Yeah, hi. Just more or less one of the same sort of questions Helen was asking, really. We have got a sewage works in Frome, and I don't know whether some of the problems with overflow are to do with the capacity of that sewage works, but we're going to add to it, and the Selwood Garden community is 1,700 homes. That's a considerable amount to add to any sewage works, I would have thought. So again, I don't know how we're going to cope with that. I don't know if we would ask Wessex Water if they're controlling the sewage works and operating it, whether they have a capacity problem, but that might be worth having them feed into the whole problem. I'm just interested, Sue, thanks for your great presentation. When was the River Frome at its cleanest? Does anyone know?
Probably about 40 years ago.
Oh, just before I moved here.
Yeah. But then Cuprinol was there, of course, so that wasn't too good either.
No, I remember seeing the outflow from Cuprinol. It didn't look good, and that was just the surface water that ran off from the factory at the top of the hill there. Yeah.
Oh, there was all sorts of stuff that went in from there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Mick. Thanks, Sue. I think at this point, Rachel, we're probably going to have to move on because time is sort of going forward. If we've got other questions from the public or anyone else, I'd probably advise that they do email into the town council and we can pass comments on. But thank you very much, Sue, for your presentation. It was fantastic, and obviously from the interaction and questions you've had, obviously it's really struck a chord with a lot of people. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, thank you. At this stage, we're going to have a quick juggle around with the agenda. Originally, we had the next item as item 4 for a decision on the school streets. We're actually going to promote item number 8 up to this point, which is an update on the work to improve vocational training opportunities within the town. And this update is in the capable hands, I believe, of both Vivian and Councillor Maxine Cooley.
Right, thank you, Laura. Just an update on the vocational training group. We set it up last September, and the goals of the group was to try and identify what training and upskilling opportunities there were in Frome, and also how could we work together to improve this. One of the goals was to pull together all the different training providers from in and around Frome, because we were aware that a lot of people currently just now go out of Frome to get their training. So we have in the group, we have brought in Somerset Skills and Learning and Skill Up Somerset. Those two organisations particularly look at apprenticeships and traineeships. We also have local organisations, Adventure and Frome Community Education. And we brought in the wider colleges, as we knew from conversations with Frome College that a lot of students go to Bath College, Strode College and Wiltshire College. Through talking with the group, we now know where they are now. They're very much offering blended learning. So Bath, Strode and Wiltshire colleges have started doing face-to-face classroom teaching, and Adventure have as well started their START courses, but they're also beginning to realise that there is still a need and a desire for online teaching. And so the group has very much been working together. We meet probably every 2 months to share best practice, talk about the challenges we're facing, and also opportunities that have come together. Some examples of collaboration was Adventure over August, over summer. We're helping Frome Community Education train up their trainees on how to deliver courses online. So one of the outcomes has been trying to get all these training providers to share their experiences and to offer the best services in Frome. In March this year, we had planned the Spring Forward event that was going to be held at Somerset Skills and Learning's new offices in Palmer Street. However, this had to be cancelled due to COVID. So what we have been doing over the last few months is working with these training providers to try and gather what training opportunity they're currently offering people and also planning to offer in the next 6 months. And this is going to go onto a new digital platform on the new Frome website that's going to be launched soon. So we're going to see this section of the website as an important signposting area to let anyone know what they can do, what courses there are, and we'll also be doing campaigns to drive people to look at this site. Next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. As well as meeting with training providers, we've also realised that it's important to find out what the business needs are. So what businesses need in terms of skill gaps. And we have identified the top 30 employers in Frome who employ 50 or more employees. And working with Somerset Skills and Learning over August and September, they've been contacting these employers to try and gauge what the skill gaps are. I mean, just now the feedback from employers is that training is sadly not a priority just now. There's a lot of uncertainty amongst businesses. However, they do know it's important to upskill their workforce, and we certainly will be going back to them probably in the new year to try and get some more information and to keep engaged with them. There was also a survey that went out through Somerset County, which went to businesses to understand the impact of COVID. That went out in August, and we're waiting to find the results from that. But there was quite a big section on there about upskilling, taking on trainees and apprenticeships, and also possible changes to the workforce. In terms of working with young people, we're really keen to understand what the needs of young people are. Where do they go when they leave school? What training needs do they need to get the jobs they want? So we work closely with Frome College, in particular with their World of Work programme. We've also, on the group, we have a representative from Critchell School with their supported internships, which is getting the students from Critchell to have meaningful 6-month to a year placements in businesses around the town. And also on our working group is ASK, who are not the pizza people, but people who do apprenticeships, and particularly they liaise directly with schools about how they can raise the profile of apprenticeships in schools, because it's something that we feel has not necessarily been a priority for schools, and getting that message is strengthened both to parents and to students. Very important in terms of understanding the market needs of Frome is to be liaising with Job Centre, and we have a representative from Job Centre Plus also on the group. And this has been really valuable at finding out about new initiatives that have been coming in, and also monitoring changes in the market, the labour market. Next slide, please, Laura. So in terms of latest initiatives, there has been a focus from government on funding initiatives for upskilling for businesses, and this has made it quite a key topic for businesses. However, we appreciate from our discussion with businesses, it's challenging, it's confusing. A lot of these initiatives they want people to take them up before January next year, which at this time of uncertainty is a challenge. So the group has been discussing this. We have been feeding back to try and campaign to get these incentives extended, so that there's a bigger take up as businesses become slightly more assured as the year goes on. But we did run a webinar with Skill Up and Somerset Skills and Learning to local businesses, highlighting benefits of apprenticeships and trainees, but also running through the financial support that the government currently is offering. So just now, the latest offer from government is if you take on a business takes on an apprentice before January next year, they could get up to £3,000 funding to support that role. Another scheme that has just been launched is the Kickstart scheme. This is funding, again, from central government for employers to take on a new role for 6 months, focused on young people aged 16 to 24 years old who are on universal credit. We have promoted this to businesses around the town. We've had a fair number. We've had about half a dozen businesses come back to say they're interested. But one of the challenges with the scheme is you have to be able to take on 30 places, and no small market town businesses in a position to do that. So we have been discussing it with Adventure and other organisations, but how can we look at doing this collaboratively to coordinate these different expressions of interest to really give them a chance of offering this to young people in the town. Next slide, please. So, as I say, the group's been running for a year now. I do think really one of the key things has just been getting training providers, Job Centre Plus, schools together in a room discussing the issues. And from this, we've come up with some next steps, some of which are what we're doing now and just continue to do. But we are working closely with Job Centre Plus to try and establish an employment hub in Frome. This is something that Somerset County have said that there is a funding and opportunity to have employment hubs in towns across the county, and we really are working keenly to try and get one here in Frome. There would be a youth drop-in, there'd be skilling up opportunities, there'd potentially be a digital library where people could borrow laptops for a period of time. So we think it would really benefit Frome, and we've expressed our desire to have it here, and we're following that through with Job Centre Plus. We will be continuing to work closely with schools and youth groups to try and understand the needs of young people and the changing needs. Just now, feedback from Frome colleges that young people, they're not necessarily signing up for universal credit because they're able to get jobs, but they're not the jobs they want. They're part-time jobs, they're small jobs, they're not reliable. And in a way, we're almost being missed because we're not able to get them onto training programs. So this is something we're working closely with the school to let them know about the training programs that are available. We realise it's important to make sure that the training offered in the town is relevant to what businesses need, because we want to be able to encourage businesses to take people on so that the skills match the needs of local businesses. And as I say, just now has been a struggle getting hold of businesses, but we're going to continue to keep that dialogue going, let them know about incentives and schemes that are going up. And very much we see our role as Frome Town Council as kind of hearing what businesses want and then signposting them, directing them to training providers or apprenticeship providers, and also getting back to training providers saying that there's a need here for this type of training. This is where the gaps are. What can we do to fill that and try and fill it locally? As I mentioned, the Spring Forward event didn't happen, but we want to make it happen digitally. And I know Rachel and her team are working on a new, pretty accessible website that's going to be launched soon. And we will be driving people to that, both individuals and businesses, so that they can find out what upskilling and training opportunities there are happening, and also just engage people more about what their needs are. And finally, as I say, we see one of the key things is getting our group talking regularly, keeping the enthusiasm of the group going. So we will continue to hold regular vocational training group meetings, encouraging cross collaboration between the groups and sharing best practice. And, so really it's just to talk through what our next steps are, and to hear if anybody has any thoughts on them or any questions.
Thanks, Viv. Before I go to any other councillors, Maxine, I think you probably want to come in at this point.
Thanks very much, Andy, and thanks for moving it up the agenda. It's all my fault. But
no worries.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to say how brilliant it's been working with Vivian and Peter and all the groups around Frome who are involved in this. The enthusiasm of everybody is incredible, and what's really good is that because we started this a year ago, various groups around Frome had already bonded when COVID started, so we already had an established group, and people who hadn't really talked to each other that much before were in communication. And with the changing times we've got, and they are really changing, you know, we're having to reassess almost weekly what's going on. It is great that these bonds have been established and that the communication is established between various training providers. another thing that's changing is, although the group was always established to look after the training needs of young people and older people, there's now even more emphasis on people who are having to return to work or having lost jobs. And so, you know, we're really having to look at all age groups with equal interest. So, you know, that's it really. We just need to continue doing this. Everybody needs, you know, we all just need to keep on top of government legislation, because that's changing all the time with apprenticeships and different grants that can be got. But a lot of groups like Skill Up and Somerset Skills, in fact, they're all amazing at keeping up with all those changes. And we just need to do what we can, and bringing it online. You know, we realise not everybody has access to online, but we're also trying to ensure that the people that are harder to reach will also be reached with this, getting everything under one banner. So thank you to everybody for everything we've done, and we just look forward to continuing the work. And thank you, Andy.
No worries, Max. Thanks for that, and thanks for all the hard work you've put in, and Viv's put in, and Peter's put in. It really is appreciated by us all. So I will take questions. I've got Anne and then Ali, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks Viv and Maxine. I noticed that David Warburton, our local MP, at the beginning of September was talking about the various apprenticeship schemes that the government was promoting at the time, and encouraging Southwest businesses to apply for these apprenticeship support schemes. And I just wonder if he's been contacted about what we're doing in Frome, and whether you've received any support from him at all.
I mean, we haven't contacted him directly about it. We have, as I say, particularly with Skill Up Somerset, we have been campaigning quite hard to try, and with things like the incentive for the apprenticeship running out in January, we have been pushing that to central government. So they may have been in touch with him about that. But you're right. I think I mean, Anita's doing a summary for the Mayor's column about vocational training, because we think we've got quite a few things to talk about. So we have got some kind of newsworthy information that we could send out to him, and particularly when the Spring Forward site goes live, and there's lots of information there and resources, that could be a really positive thing to link him to.
Yeah, it would be nice to see some real tangible support from our MP in the town, I think, on this matter.
Thanks, Anne. Ali, please. You're on mute, Ali.
Sorry. Thanks for the presentation. I think the whole kind of the work that you're doing is really exciting. I guess I'm kind of really interested in the fact that I would imagine that quite a few of the young people, maybe not those who are coming to be reskilled, might well have complex needs, mental health problems, maybe a kind of inability to motivate themselves, and that's by all means not all of them, but I do know in the past when there have been apprenticeship schemes, that has been a problem, and that this is for 6 months. Well, for the Kickstart is for 6 months. I wonder what support is put in during those 6 months.
Is that for the Kickstart programme?
Well, it's for the Kickstart, but it also does apply so that the apprenticeship role is actually what the person wants to learn, as opposed to being used as a cleaner or a, you know, that can often happen, or has happened in the past.
I think with the Kickstart, the reason why they're looking at getting small organisations to collaborate under one coordinator is that the coordinator would be responsible for employability skills, upskilling in terms of life skills and employability skills. So there will be an element of that. But I know certainly when we started a year ago, one of the key things we were interested in was these life skills for people, young people leaving school without the life skills that we felt. And this is why it's been great having From College part of it. of the group, because they at the time they felt there was a need for life coaches, mentors, people to come in and talk to, just like even budgeting and interviewing skills and confidence, body language. And it does feel actually that has slightly, I think just now with COVID, it has been moved away a bit. And I think Maxine was very passionate about that. And we need to remember that. That was one of our mutual passions actually at the launch of it.
Yeah. Can I just add to what Vivian said? I'd just like to add to what Vivian said. Ali, you're absolutely right. And originally, actually, before COVID, the job centre actually do a joint well-being and getting people into work event. And we were going to sort of be part of that. And I still do agree, it's absolutely vital. You can't just look at people's job prospects without looking at their well-being and their mental health as well. So Viv's right, COVID has made that a little harder, but I think that it's still very much on our agenda. And as Vivian said, it's our joint passion, because if a young person or someone of any age isn't feeling as if they can cope with work, then putting any amount of job opportunities in front of them just isn't going to make any difference. So, you know, we are aware of that, and it is something very much on our agenda now. And as we come out, you know, hopefully next year when we're recovering from COVID, we will be looking at well-being, something, you know, to do with both training and well-being. Thanks, Ali.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Anita, please. Anita, you've just muted yourself.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Andy. And thanks very much, Viv and Maxine. I've been very involved in this vocational training with these meetings. And I have to say, I love the work that's going on. And you're quite right, Max, the enthusiasm is enormous. But I was just thinking, actually, because I have promised to put a lot of this in my mayor's column this week, but it is going to be an extremely busy column. But if I start with talking about vocational training in that column, I just wonder what you think, referring back to Anne's point, whether I should actually email my column to David Warburton and see what he thinks, maybe asking for some sort of response to that. What do you think? Yeah, okay, done deal.
Excellent, thanks, Anita. I'd just like to ask a question if I could. Obviously, my involvement with the Chamber of Commerce in Frome is quite well known. One of the things that was raised with the previous president, going back a couple of years, was the idea of mentorship and local businesses, even if they weren't in a position to take on apprentices, perhaps maybe some of the leadership within those businesses actually devote maybe an hour or two a week to mentoring younger people. Is that something that you guys are still exploring? And if it is, how do businesses get involved in that, please?
It was something a couple of meetings ago that Frome College did bring to us, and it was this idea that they would love some kind of connection with the business community to have a mentoring. So particularly looking at young people, people preparing to leave school, and how would we engage businesses with it? I mean, there was. It's quite a struggle, I think, to get businesses to do it. But as a group, we felt it was an important thing to look into, and it might be something that maybe we have to wait till next year to look at. But the college is open for it. A challenge, I think, is probably getting businesses, but maybe we could work with the chambers on that to identify some businesses that would be willing to go in, link up with young people in the school.
Thanks, Viv. To me, it just seems a natural extension to the interview days that we do, and myself and I know a lot of other businesses and people in town get involved in. So it'd be good to find out about that. Thank you very much. Oh, Anita, sorry, is there another question?
Yeah, just a very quick thought. I just wonder if there's any scope for maybe any of the Frome Town councillors becoming mentors to any of the youngsters out there who might want to go into this sort of thing.
Yeah, Andy, can I jump in there? Because I was just going to say that I don't see why COVID should stop a degree of mentoring, because we can do FaceTime and all this sort of thing. And I'm happy, you know, if you want to look at that, and, you know, we could sort of do that offline after this meeting, or not tonight. I don't mean you'll be exhausted, but another day we could look at this again with you and the Chamber of Commerce, and see if we can set up some sort of online mentoring at the moment, or if they can, because we don't do it. We help other people, you know, do the things that they do. But I do think it would be really encouraging to a young person to actually talk to someone in the business during this time, even if it's on FaceTime. So I think you're absolutely right, and it's something we should look at.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, at this stage, I'm going to have to move on to the next item. But thank you very much, Viv. Thanks, Maxine. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate the week you've had. So thank you very much. Right, guys. So next item on the agenda. What I'm going to do, I think I'm going to take the next agenda item, which is for decision the latest on the School Streets project, and a proposal to start the trial in February, March. And then following that item directly, I think we'll then take a break, because I think we're probably going to need it at that stage. So this item will be with Peter, I believe.
Thank you, Andy, and good evening, everyone. You'll be pleased to hear that this will be a very brief presentation. Obviously, at the last meeting, we discussed the school street in some detail, and it's been well promoted, so I won't be going into detail about the scheme tonight. Really, the report is about the timing of implementation, and also Emma, after me, Emma Parker, is going to talk a little bit about the active travel challenge that we hope to do over the next few months. So just a quick update. At the last meeting of Town Matters, councillors agreed to going ahead with a feasibility and consultation exercise involving a pop-up trial, and that was originally proposed to start in September. Since then, we've door knocked, we've distributed surveys and leaflets to over 2,500 households. We've held 3 community meetings. We've engaged with neighbourhood groups. We've discussed the project at Nunney Parish Council. In fact, recently had a meeting with residents in Nunney. And we've also continued to engage with the heads of the 3 schools involved in the School Street area. And I can say that overall, the concept has been broadly welcomed. We now propose to start a trial a little later, and I'd just like to explain why that is the case. So we understand now that the County Council may commission a road safety audit. Now, this is quite commonplace with highway schemes. It's something that we faced with our marketplace scheme, and we understand that it's a possibility that they may wish to do a road safety audit on this one. We're waiting to hear back on that, but that would be in itself probably a reason for some delay. Secondly, we know that the Department for Transport have delayed announcements of their funding. We don't yet have a date for when that announcement will come, but that is fairly critical in terms of delivering all of the things that this project is about. Crucially, in a recent meeting with the heads of the schools, they have said that they would welcome more time, particularly for engagement with parents of their students. We believe that a later start would allow potentially the parking management measures that have been talked about on Weymouth Road and Somerset Road to be implemented first. We are waiting for some confirmation from County about the timing of that, but again, a delay to the start would allow implementation of that. A later start would allow more time for engagement and in due course refinement of the design. And I think all of these are, to my mind, very sound reasons why we should look at a later start. February, March is the date that we have focused on in the report. It has been suggested to me that we could consider a slightly later start to take account of the clocks going forward in March. Light and better weather conditions might make a difference in terms of the take-up, particularly by students of this scheme in terms of walking and cycling, but I'll leave you to discuss that. And Oakfield Academy, Trinity First School and Critchell School are very supportive of this approach, as are the police and the county council. So those are all very critical issues. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Emma, who's just going to say a few words about the Active Travel Challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, so what we can do is look at doing a school travel challenge in the winter, and then doing another school travel challenge when the launch date is agreed. And we've done a school travel challenge 3 times before, 3 years running. And when we've done that, we've seen a 20% increase in active journeys to school, which on average across the whole of Frome has gone from an average of 53% of the school community travelling actively to school up to 73%. So looking at COVID safe measures, we'll have to adapt the kind of things that we've done before, but we can still do quite a lot of activities with schools, which would mean that we've got much more communication going on with parents and with pupils and with staff as well. And we can still do lots of it, like before we've done a treasure hunt and Be Bright days and things like that. So we can do these things in schools before this starts to kind of re-engage families with the idea of travelling actively to school. Like I said, it's been successful before, but we haven't been able to repeat it throughout the year because we've not had capacity to. So this gives us, the delay with this gives us an opportunity to do something now and do something in the winter to encourage people to have a go at tackling the winter weather when they're walking or cycling to school. So there's some things we can look at, and particularly I've been in communication with Somerset County Council about bikeability. Oh, excuse me. So we can look at some road safety measures before the school streets are implemented as well. So looking at bikeability, looking at route planning, looking at safe routes to school, getting kids to think about what they would like to see on their journey to school, that kind of thing. So that's what we're hoping to do with the delayed school street start. That's probably, I have much more that I could say, but I think that's probably enough detail, unless anyone has any questions for more on that.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks, Peter, before. So at this stage, I've got a number of hands up. So Anita and then John, please.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I love the idea of the whole active travel challenge. I think that's wonderful. Very supportive of that. Peter, thank you very much for your presentation on that. I think I am pleased to hear that there will be a delay to this, I have to say. And referencing the point that you brought up earlier, that maybe slightly later would be even better. You know, taking into account the fact that after the end of March, the clocks will go forward, which means it will be lighter evenings, that the weather will be better, and the idea of dropping quite young children off sometimes at the end of a road to walk when they have to contend with rain and wind and all sorts of things, and dark nights as well. I think it would sit much better with me if we did look at a slightly later date for that, I have to say.
Thanks, Anita. John, please.
Hi, so I have a couple of comments and then a proposal which will lead to amending what we're going to vote on. For me, well, I mean, my views on this scheme are well known. I mean, I sort of see this as an example of how not to do things, because it was brought in a rush without consultation, and was going to be starting in September, really in a rush. And part of it starts with, you know, the way the consultant was acquired without sort of, you know, any tender or anything like that. And we got questionable value for money, several £1,000s to a consultant who did not actually, a consultant who did not consult, which is quite funny, did not consult with the councillors in the most affected wards by this scheme, did not consult with Somerset County Council and the traffic department, who'd done a 2-year consultation in this area, did not consult the police, etc. And the scheme originally was going to be imposed without actually consulting local people. The first information I received was simply, it wasn't the leaflet that 2,500 leaflets went out. Well, it simply told us that the road was going to be closed off. So then that's the other issue. We're going to close the roads, not close the roads. So recently, one of my constituents sent a letter in, and he was told unequivocally it's not going to close the roads. Well, actually, the scheme and the consultation said we're going to close all these roads. And actually, it's very confusing, not even knowing what is planned. But then and for me, the problem was the information dribbled out about this slowly but surely. And so there's a question on the money. How the money, that this was about money, that Department for Transport had an offer for funding. So that we need to do something with substantive impact in order to acquire this funding. So we must do it. So the logic of we're going to close roads we don't want to close because we want to get money to close more roads didn't fit, and we're being driven by funding, which seemed a bit unclear. So I think it's just not very well thought out. Particularly, my main issue with the scheme is it's not town-wide. And actually, we're concerned about safety for children going to school town-wide. It's with both cycling and walking. And what was just presented, perfect example of that. What safe routes for children? You just close off an area to cars, and then children can walk in the streets. We're teaching children to cycle and walk in streets without thinking cars are going to be there. But actually, what we want to do is make cycling and walking for children safe across town. And so for me, that's the other issue. And then the last point I'll make before my proposition, Andy, is the money that is being used to fund this was originally for the climate assembly, which we decided not to do for various reasons. And then it came to this fund, and now it's being offered to something else. So I'm a bit confused because actually we're facing a deficit this year, and there's some other schemes we voted in just recently, the marketplace, where we don't have funding for that. There are other also options where consultations have come out with local residents who have actually expressly want to close roads and keep them closed, like Palmer Street and others. I'll let other councillors talk about those schemes. So my proposition on this thing that we're going to be asked to vote on is, first of all, it's the content of what School Street scheme is. That actually, the School Street scheme as conceived was basically an off-the-shelf scheme that had been done in London. The consultant offered this up as the solution. I'm not sure why it cost us £2,000 for this solution. It would be the first one outside London, the longest in the country, etc. But actually didn't address the fundamental problem. So I'd like us to look at the content of that so-called School Street scheme. And if we're asking for money from the Department of Transport, we should be looking town-wide on that. So my proposition is, yes, we delay this scheme until March, February, March. I think that there's a logic to that, which is impeccable, which we mentioned way back when this is approved, that we should have this time to consult anyway. But also we think about the content of the School Street scheme and about widening it to more town-wide, and that the allocation of the funding, the reallocation, we already have money in the budget. It's already been allocated to school streets in our normal budget. This is a £4,000 little bonus that we got from a donation. I think we should be paying for the active travel challenge as planned from our budget, existing budget, and preserve this other 4,000 for other things, including, I would suggest, looking at Palmer Street and other propositions where people want to maintain the closure of streets. So I just wanted that. So my proposition is to, I would approve the first part, but the second, but I would like a conditional on the content of the actual proposal. Otherwise, I would like to reject the whole thing. And I say we just forget it and move on to something else. Thank you very much for giving me this time.
Right, thanks, John. So Paul, in terms of proposals, before I go to any other councillor questions and comments, do we need to discuss that as a potential amendment, or do we come back to that after everybody else has?
I think given that John is suggesting an amendment to the second recommendation, I think once we've had the discussion, we do the first recommendation. And then if John can propose an amendment to recommendation 2, we can vote on that amendment. So
but for me, the amendment to the first bit is actually the content of the school streets proposal, not the proposal that's been shoved through our doors saying, you know, we're going to close off all these streets permanently. Because actually I don't even know what I'm voting on anymore, because are they closing streets? Are they not? I don't know. I think what I want to do is re-examine the content of that.
John, I think I'm guessing, but I think you're alone in not understanding that the streets will not be closing. I mean, I know that Peter and Anna before him have let you know that. I'm not clear on what you're proposing on recommendation 1 then.
Well, it's good to have the confirmation on that. And so does that mean what we're proposing is when it goes up, it's going to be a pop-up and then a trial? Or we're skipping the pop-up and going straight to the trial of whatever is decided without closing the roads off?
Peter.
Much depends really on what emerges from the DFT bid. I mean, it really depends on the money that we secure from DFT, and we're still awaiting that announcement.
So I guess my question would, the DFT money, if it did come, could we apply it across town in a way which is not just the school streets, which is proposed up here? Because it seems to me that would be a really great, this is a fantastic opportunity for a town-wide sort of solution.
Can I just say that in response to that, the DFT application that was submitted by county was allied to the specific proposals that you heard back in August. So there will be no surprises really about that, but I think if we were going to try and make this a town-wide scheme, we'd probably have to go back to DFT. I think the other point that's worth making is that one way in which we can address the needs of the town as a whole in terms of walking and cycling is by developing a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. We have an opportunity to draw down funding from another source, which is the Somerset Climate Emergency Community Fund. We've been invited to make an application, and we're going to be working on that over the coming weeks. Emma Parker is going to be working with me on that. That is an opportunity for us to look much more strategically across the town at the needs of the town from a cycling and walking point of view. So we can do both, actually. And actually, if we can secure funding for what is known as the LCWIP, the Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, quickly, we can take account of that when we actually come to the final design of the school street. But obviously we've got to work on that and submit it before we know where we stand. But I would suggest that that's the way we look at the town as a whole.
Okay, so that's great. That answers all my questions. In which case, Paul, to answer your question, my amendment is only to the second part. And for that, what I'm saying is,
well, John,
should we do that later?
Yeah. Let me just hear from the other guys, and we'll come back on that when we come to the proposal. Thanks a lot, John. Thanks, Peter, for clarifying that. So I've got Anne, then Rob, then Paul, please.
Okay, mine is just a small point, and it was some reading I was doing today from Break, which is the road safety charity, and it's really in support of postponing this until earlier next year rather than later this year. And it's research has shown that serious and fatal pedestrian collisions increased 10% in the 4 weeks after the clocks go back. So if we were to do it in the end of October, beginning of November time, that's just at that critical time when the clocks have gone back. And I would hate any road safety issues that are there because of the clocks go back to impact on the road safety issues that we're trying to improve through safer school streets. So that's why I think another reason why we move it until early next year instead, to just break that potential link with the clocks going back. So that's the only point I wanted to make.
Great, thanks, Dan. So I've got Rob, then Paul, then Scott, then Ali. and then Anita, but I'll come back to you individually. So Rob, then Paul, please.
Thank you. Yes, well, I am disappointed that it's going to very likely be moved back. I can understand the reasons that are being put forward for that, so I'm not about to oppose that. But I'd like some clarification on the DFT funding. If we do procure that, it seems like it has to be spent by the end of March. So I don't quite see how that then ties in with proposing to initiate the scheme at the end of March at the same time. I don't see how you can do both in one and the same go. So could you help me get my head around that?
Peter, if you'd like to come back, please.
We're just getting some clarification on that, actually, from our colleagues at the county. There is a possibility, actually, that the money may only need to be committed at that point, but we're still waiting for clarification. Well, at the moment, we are still working on the basis that we'll need to move quite quickly when we hear from DFT.
Right, because I mean, I do think that actually is very pertinent to the actual success of this scheme at all. I mean, it seems that initially the idea was to do a pop-up with the money that we actually had, to be able to demonstrate to well, everyone who was going to be involved in it, that actually it was a you know, a good idea, and well, in practice rather than just on paper, and that if we now then delay it and then find that we've shot ourselves in the foot because we can't implement it in time to actually spend the money that we've been given, then we could find ourselves in April with having not done anything at all.
Peter, again, please.
My expectation is that we will hear from DFT well in advance of that date, well in advance of February, March. But there are some details that we're still waiting to hear back from county on. So I mean, that obviously would avoid the problem that you've highlighted, Rob.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Rob. So then Paul, then Scott, then Ali, please.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I wanted to kind of echo what Rob just said. I'm very disappointed that this is being delayed, as are, I'm sure, all those people that went knocking on doors, and including myself, in fact, and we're really excited about the prospect of making streets safer for schools in the near term. But I understand the reasons for delaying it. I've spoken to the consultant, Jess Reed, and she's supporting the delay. So I'm not about to argue against it, because if the people, our experts, if you like, in this field are suggesting it's a good idea to delay it, then that's fair enough. What I would like to just question it though is just how useful it is spending the money on the school travel challenge. I mean, I think they're probably a great idea, the school travel challenge. It gets more kids, and from what Emma says, more kids cycling and walking to school for that week. But unfortunately, as far as I understand, after that week, it just goes back to normal. It pretty much goes back to normal. I'm not quite sure what we achieve from doing that. And as I said before, part of the problem that kids don't travel to school more actively is because the roads are dangerous. So encouraging them to walk and cycle to school without doing something about the danger that's existent is kind of slightly defeating the purpose of it in some ways. So what I would like to suggest is, and maybe this needs an amendment to the our suggestions, is that money is spent now on the first two stages of the LC WIP, the local cycling walker infrastructure plan, rather than wait until January to find out if we get money from Somerset, because the first two stages, I believe, I think in the region of £4,000 or £5,000. I can't remember exactly what it is. So we could actually make a really useful start on that. And actually, maybe we can do that as well as, of course, the travel challenge in some way. But I would really like us to make a start on that sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Paul. So I've got Scott, then Ali, then Anita, please.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, I mean, overall I do support the scheme, and I did have a few concerns, the majority of which were dealt with by the fact that it was pushed forward from September to October. I think the sooner we can do the project, the better. It's a good project. It's a worthwhile project. However, I do still have concerns about the impact on the roads surrounding the roads that are going to be partially closed, specifically the butts, which quite a lot of the children who are travelling towards Oakfield and that sort of direction are actually coming from the Mount area. So the butts is a long road that basically splits that whole thing in two. And there's lots of risk on that road with lorries and cars, and I think anything that pushes more traffic down that road is as has been mentioned, we want to make the roads safe as possible. And yes, we might be making those half a dozen roads more safer, but it can't be at the detriment and increased risk of other roads. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Ali, please.
I'm just aware that Peter keeps putting his hand up. I wondered if it was a point of clarification, Peter.
Well, thank you, Ali. Just to pick up on the point about the butts, certainly included in the DFT bid was a proposal to introduce new crossings, both on the butts and Broadway, recognising the risks associated with those roads for pedestrians moving into the School Street area. I appreciate that those require further design, further consultation, but certainly that was part of the thinking in terms of the DFT bid, that there will be a package of measures that would include making it safer for people to cross the road at various points into the School Street area. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Ali. So I've got Anita and then Rich.
No, I haven't asked my question. I was just aware that Peter kept putting his hand up. So I wanted to say that I also felt really disappointed, but understand some of the thinking behind putting this off. It never was proposed to shut the roads. I never understood that. I'm not quite sure where John got that understanding from. My understanding is that it was a pop-up, and the purpose of a pop-up is to raise objection, to step back after it's done, to learn, to change things, and a really live, innovative way of consultation. That doesn't mean that there aren't problems. We know that there are problems all over the town with traffic. But this is a way of actually trying to shift pedestrian and biking above car. And what I've seen about cars coming through the high street since that market square, since the market has been closed, I've just felt so angry and upset by it, because we now have a much more dangerous, suddenly car has become master again. So my understanding was never actually going to shut the roads. We were decreasing access so that children and adults could bike more safely. I also just wanted to, point of clarification, but I have already clarified this with John, and I'm not sure why he's brought it up again, about actually the consultant in some way insinuating the consultant was employed in a fashion that wasn't the right way. My understanding is that a consultant can be, you don't have to go out to tender. Is it above 3,000 or? But anyway, that this consultant was employed in completely the right way. And actually, I think Anna went further and actually interviewed 3 different consultants, even though she didn't actually have to. And I would just say to all of us as councillors, we can be bolder. We can't, if we are constantly talking about consultation, we need to have a discussion about what we mean by that. Because when you consult a town, you're going to get some people that totally disagree and some people that agree. And if we're bolder, we might change things. If we're not, nothing will change.
Thanks, Ali. So I've now got Anita and then Rich, please.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, the only point I was going to make was I do understand that roads won't necessarily be closed, but I'm not sure about whether they're going to be stewarded, whether there will be anybody there to try and dissuade people from driving, or whether it will just be bollards or notices to try and stop people driving through those roads. My only point that I'm trying to make here is that when I was doing a lot of door knocking, asking people about their impressions of this school streets thing, was that I came across a lady in particular who said, look, I have 7 children because I've just taken over 3 of them from my sister as guardian. And I have to leave home at 8:25 in the morning, and I'm not back until 9:15, and I can't possibly deliver all these children to their different schools unless I have the capacity to drive them. And I just wondered how that would be received by other parents, that some people have a requirement where they need to drop their children off. I mean, should we be considering something like a window sticker that says, I am exempt from the driving streets, or whatever, rather than cause anxiety amongst other potential parents and drivers? That's my question.
Thank you, Anita. Peter, did you want to come back on that?
I think the issue for us is that this proposal is a 24/7 proposal, which makes it difficult to have stewards on the street. I think that Jess made it clear that that wasn't part of the proposal. But the reality is that we have time to adjust, to amend, to come up with ideas that will help with the take up of this idea. And all ideas are welcome, really. I mean, the idea that you suggested, Anita, with regards to window stickers, etc. I mean, there are lots of tactics that we can use, lots of ideas that we could employ to try and encourage the maximum participation in this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Emma, did you want to come in on that at all?
Yes. I was about to say the same kind of thing Peter was saying, really, that it is a flexible scheme. So for the lady with 7 children who won't be able to possibly park and stride with that many children in different places, she will be able to drive as close to the school as is allowed, you know, not going on the zigzags. So you can, in exceptional circumstances, if you really have to, then you will be able to get through. But we just hope that people who don't have to will choose not to. But I can see the point, Anita, that there could be some conflicts between parents, that one parent does and another parent doesn't. So that could be a really good idea, to have some kind of sign to let people know that they have permission. But we will have a stakeholder group, and we'll have monthly meetings to discuss ideas like that and to move forwards with things. So yeah, so we will keep that in mind. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
Thanks, Emma. I think there's some very real challenges and things to think about with this, because there are parents who have got children at different schools and will need to then drive on to work. So, you know, there are things that need to be taken into account. Rich, please.
Okay, thanks, Andy. I basically support both recommendations, but I think we probably need to take them separately to have a vote to be clear about what they both are. So very quickly, number one, if we said something like delay the start of the implementation of School Street programme until February, March 2020, subject to DFT funding and further considerations or further examination of the scheme, that would kind of give us time to include some of John's points, and it would show that we are going to carry on discussing this. I agree with putting it back to March. The second proposal, I'm a big fan of the School Travel Challenge. I was one of the people who started it a long time ago with Missing Link and Sustrans. And I think the point is that lots of kids will walk or cycle that week. Yes, a lot of them might go back to not walking and cycling the week after, but some of the activities in there, like safety, like planning a route that Emma mentioned, like the doctor bike stuff that we do, is really important for kids. And what we're saying here is we want to do it twice. We don't want to do it just once. We're going to do it over winter, and we're going to do it again when we do the school street program. I think that's what we're saying, isn't it? So I would vote for both, but the first one, I'd like to sort of amend the end of it to allow for some further discussion. And I'd like us to vote on the two recommendations separately.
Okay, thanks, Rich. Paul?
Yeah, I think what we're in danger of having amendments on amendments on amendments here. I think what I've heard is that I think John has an amendment to 1 and 2. I think no, just number 1 or number 2, John.
Could I clarify?
Yeah.
I mean, what Rich said, I totally agree, because now that I know, and it's been said clearly to me that the scheme does not intend to close roads, I think delaying is fine, and I think the qualification would be good because further consideration, although I think, Rich, in the paper, further consideration is taken into account because there's consultations in the paper, so that might ease us just voting for that amendment as it stands, knowing full well that further consideration will be undertaken. But for the second bit, the fact that we've budgeted already 20,000, it says in this paper, we budgeted already from our normal budget to do the active travel challenge, which I fully support. So we should do that anyway out of normal budget. This 4,000, I would say that we reallocated to other purposes and leave it at that, because there are other purposes which we're going to have needs for to fulfill, and that's 4,000. That's my proposal. Thank you.
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So what I'm hearing from both Rich and John now is no changes to recommendation 1. Okay, so obviously, no, I've got that wrong again. Anita.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm very happy with the idea of delaying the implementation of this, but I would prefer to see it beyond the end of March. That's my only concern, because of the timing of winter and weather.
So would you like to propose an amendment to recommendation 1 then, Anita?
I'd be very happy to see it start at the beginning of April, after the clocks go back.
So what we have, Andy, is a recommendation, a proposal from Anita. Laura, do you think you could bring up the recommendation, please, on the screen? So hopefully we can all see that. So what Anita is proposing is, and I'll read out including the proposal, delay the start of the implementation of the school streets program until the beginning of April, subject to DFT funding. Is that, did I get the right end of the stick, Anita?
Yes,
great.
Thank you.
So Andy, what we'd need now is someone to second that. And if there is a seconder, then we would vote on it.
Lovely. Laura, could you take that off the screen, please, so I can just see? Fantastic, thank you. So Anita, you're proposing that. So can I have somebody to, can I have somebody to second? John?
Then you vote on this amendment.
Sorry,
Andy. What you're voting on now, we have a proposer and a seconder, and we're voting on the amendment, and then pedantically, you have to vote on the amended recommendation.
right. So we're voting on the amendment. So we've got the proposer and the seconder. Can I have all councillors who are in favour, please?
So we've got John has got a real hand and a blue hand, so has Rich. So I'm assuming that anyone who wants to vote has either got a blue hand or a hand up. So
Anita, you will need to put your hand up because you proposed it.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6. So there are 6 in favour of that. So could we just have those against?
For those against, please.
Can the people take their blue hands down if they? You can't vote for and against, I'm afraid. Okay. So those against Anita's proposal are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Has Sheila voted? Oh, Sheila can't vote because she's not a committee member. So for the first time ever, we have a tie, and the chair has the casting vote. So Andy, are you voting in favour or against Anita's proposal?
So as I've already done, I vote in favour for Anita's amendment.
Okay, so that's carried by majority, that the recommendation now stands as delay the start of the implementation of the school streets programme until the beginning of April, subject 2021, subject to DFT funding. So if we need someone to propose that.
So we'll take Anita again, and then seconded by Rich.
And then
is it possible to ask a quick question?
Sorry, Paul, you've broken up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Paul, I can hear you. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to ask a quick question for clarification, because as I understand it, it's possible that the DFT funding might have to be spent by the end of March. And if we're proposing to delay this till the beginning of April, we may lose that funding. But with that question subject to DFT funding, does that mean if we do have to spend it by the end of March, we can bring it forward? I'm slightly confused.
Yeah. Should I?
Yes, please, Paul.
A pragmatic response to that, Paul, is I think it would be the wisest thing to do to stick to the amendment we have. If it turns out that the unexpected happens and we get the funding and an insistence from DFT that it has to be literally spent by the end of March, I think we could probably come back and just ask that question of councillors then. I think, why would the DFT want to do something like this, where this would be such a landmark scheme for them nationally, without and not have some flexibility on there? But I think the right thing to do would be to come back to this committee if they are insisting that we have to spend the money, and then you can choose. Is that okay, Paul? Is that reasonable? Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks, Paul. So I've kind of lost track, but I believe we are now voting on the amendment. So Anita has proposed it, Rich has seconded it. So all those councillors in favour, please.
So if you can just keep either your blue hand or literally your hand up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's majority, but can I just check by those who...
And for those against, please.
Yeah.
I'm confused, I'm afraid, but I'll abstain.
Okay.
So Rob's against.
Rob's against. And can I just ask, Rich, Anita, Sarah and Mark, are you voting against? I thought... Okay.
No, I raised my hand electronically for Anita's amendment. 28th of March, the clocks go forward, so that fits in before the end of before April.
So we're now hands up, councillors who are voting against the amended recommendation number 1. So Rob is voting against and Sarah is voting against. That's a majority in favour of the amended recommendation.
Do you want to record abstentions?
No, unless anyone wants it listed in the minute that they abstained or voted against, then we don't have to.
Fine. Excellent, thank you very much. So I think at this point, if we take a 5-minute break.
I'm really sorry, Rob. We've got recommendation. Andy, we've got recommendation 2 to go.
Got second recommendation.
What's
been a long night.
What I heard was that John has suggested amendment, and then Paul wanted to make an amendment as well. Paul, is that right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. So the way to do that is, because John asked first, John, you have first dibs on amending recommendation number 2.
My amendment, because I'm assuming we have it in the budget anyway, because we budgeted to do the active travel challenge, which I support. I would simply like to say approve reallocating the 4,000 of the school streets budget to other purposes, because it won't stop the active travel challenge. We'll do that anyway. But then if we say to other purposes, then later on we can have a discussion, and in the next full town council meeting, we can decide exactly what to do with that money. Because we are going to have to be making savings, etc. There's that discussion coming up. So that my proposal is just to say to other purposes, and we don't have to resolve what that purpose is now.
Peter, can I just ask you to clarify that, to confirm that John's understanding is correct there, that if the 4,000 doesn't go to the active travel challenge, we will still continue to run 2 active travel challenges between now and April?
I'm not sure that that is the case, and that's the reason why we brought forward this proposal. And I'm sure Emma will confirm that. We discussed this with Sarah a couple of days ago, and we weren't, that isn't a certainty that we will have the money to do this. So I think you need to be aware of that when you vote.
Okay. So that's clarified that. John, do you still wish to propose that amendment? Yep. So shall I read out, Andy, what I understand the amended recommendation 2 is?
Yes, please, Paul.
So recommendation 2, approve reallocating £4,000 of the school streets budget to other sources, other budgets, John?
Well, to other purposes, means that we could still allocate that to the school street, to the active travel challenge if we wanted. It's a placeholder, so we say to other purposes, and then we can vote on that, agree, and then later on we can decide what's it for. And it could go to cover the budget shortfall on what Peter mentioned. So it's just to other purposes.
No, that's fine. So let me read out what I understand. Approve reallocating £4,000 of the school streets budget to other purposes, full stop. So what would be required there? So John is proposing that, and then
can we have another councillor to second that, please?
So Rob is seconding that. So you're now voting on the changed wording.
So all those councillors in favour of the amendment, please.
1, 2, 3. So that's not passed. So now we go back to the original recommendation, and we ask Paul if he would like to propose a different one.
I think it's probably would be a waste of time, really, because my amendment would be pretty much the same as John's, except I would want to earmark the money for the LC whip. So if councillors aren't voting to have it open-ended, they're unlikely to vote for it to be for the LC whip, I guess.
Okay.
And I'm not actually clear whether the LC whip would be funded anyway. So, but yeah, there's no point in making it.
Just for county funding of the LC whip, admittedly, we don't know the answer.
No, but I mean, out of our own budget. I mean, there may be money anyway in the budget for that. But anyway, I won't make an amendment to this.
Okay. So Andy, what we have then is the original recommendation 2, which I'll read out just for purposes. Approve reallocating £4,000 of the school streets budget to an active travel challenge for all schools in the next few months. So that's the recommendation that's on the table.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. So can I have a proposer for that, please? Anne, and a seconder? John? So for all those councillors in favour of approving that recommendation, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stop moving around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's a majority. That's passed.
Are there any councillors who want it recorded for voting against? Fine. Excellent. Well, I think at that point then, if we take do we want a 5 or a 10-minute break? Majority seems to be 5. So we will reconvene at 9:20. Thank you.
Hello, I'm not going to turn the video off.
Rachel, while you're presenting, do you want me to do any kind of backroom managing?
I think it should be all right, as long as, Andy, you're happy to take questions down the blue hand rail.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let anybody else ask a question who wants to, but we only have one attendee left. Couldn't hear that.
Who's the last person, all on their own?
John Warman.
Okay, would it be polite, Andy, to welcome John in as the last person? I don't know.
Yes, by all means.
So should I vote him to a panelist?
Yeah.
Yes, please. Okay, so are we ready to get started again? Excellent. So our next agenda item is for decision to look forward to the People's Budget events and the People's Budget town vote in 2021-2022. I think this is with yourself, Rachel.
Yes, it is. I only went, oh, because I thought Kate was going to go first. Right. Can everybody hear me? Community engagement and participation is an underlying important principle of this council, and one of the ways that we deliver that is through the People's Budget. So the proposal for 2021 is to continue to build on the success of the People's Budget in previous years, and to deliver both the People's Budget events and a People's Budget town vote. It will give residents, the whole idea around people's budgeting is it will give residents meaningful choices about how a proportion of the town council's budget is spent. And this means generally that we get a better engaged community, and it's been identified that the more active participation that our residents have, the stronger the community. And of course, the projects and events that float to the top in the end up well supported, having come from organisations and from more ground roots elements rather than from us, top down. And of course, the town gets excellent events and projects supported, but not delivered by us. So it also gives a breadth. We get events and projects that we wouldn't ordinarily identify ourselves. So that's the background behind it. Last year, £25,000 was made available for PB events, effectively out of what would be a traditional council's events budgets. And how that works is the £25,000 is a pot, and then our community organisations are entitled to bid for up to £10,000, and they put in a budget and a case in effect for why they think it's a good idea, and they make a little film, and then we open it up to the town, and that is the People's Budget events. So as in previous years, so we did just sneak in our vote in March, and as in previous years, all this year, all year 8 pupils voted from Oakfield, Selwood, Critchhill and Steiner School, and they took part in the voting. Oh, hang on a second, I've got a bit of an issue with my notes, so that's not so helpful. Yeah, they took part voting at the Make It Happen Youth Conference, which was delivered just before lockdown, as I said. We time it this way in order that the year 8s can vote. They can have a sort of meaningful opportunity to be able to engage in a real democratic process with real outcomes. Year 8s this year, with no exception, had excellent discussions, and as before, their votes were weighted. 30% of their votes going to the overall vote. Sorry, I need to sort out what's going on. We this time did have a very low turnout with only 295 people voting as residents, but of course all the Year 8s did vote. 2 of the winning organisations have postponed their events until next year, and but the other one, Window Wonderland, are still in the planning stage of theirs, because they'll no longer be able to develop the community workshops. We've reconfigured that slightly so that their budget will enable another event to take place, which we're all working on now, Halloween Wonderland. So that should be an important community event for the town. It will also help serve other aims. The police have asked us to help support the non-trick-or-treating in order to protect people from COVID, and so it will serve to help that aim. So where are we? So I've got a real tech issue there. Okay. So anyway, we talk. I think I'll just unplug that and just talk to you. Sorry. Now, so generally speaking, the reason that we talk to there we go. We're in the unusual position at the moment of talking about next year while still waiting for this year's events to occur. Proposal, though, is to hold another PB event project for March next year. These events that we've raised the money for will go ahead next year, and we're hoping that a whole raft of other interesting events and projects will take us forward into next year when we're allowed to do lots of interesting things. There is also a chance that Make It Happen conference may not run in the same way as previous years. We're expecting that it probably won't. We will, however, ensure that these Year 8s will have an input electronically via IT lessons. This project always straddles the new financial year, which is why I come here before the budget is set. Project is launched when the application window opens in the winter, so that the grants for the winning events can be awarded as soon as possible in April, which means that generally speaking, events which generally happen in the summertime can be delivered. Councillors are therefore being asked to allocate a budget now for the next financial year. This year, as I said, the PB events budget was £25,000. Given the success and the popularity of this project, we're hoping to retain this amount into the 2021-2022 budget. If approved, we propose to open the application window for PB events as soon as possible, and then with a view to closing it in January. The other element of PB budget, which we haven't actually delivered this year because we wanted to reevaluate and take time to review how it works in line with the strategy. So this time, again, for next year's budget, so we're looking at next year's budget here too, we're proposing the same £10,000 pot as has previously been used in other years. The difference is that this time we'll be asking for bids for projects of up to £1,000 each from street level communities. So that will mean that potentially we could have 10 marvellous street level events, or in fact, if everybody's only asking for a smaller amount of money, we could have events across the town. The idea is that projects must be deliverable in the financial year 2021 to 2022, have a costed budget and focus very much on a street or a place. They should be brought forward by residents or community groups who are happy to work with our neighbourhood networks coordinator. And of course, the projects don't all have to be different. They could all be the same idea but delivered in different places, but they do have to be identifiable as location-based. So clearly, this PB town vote is designed to complement the ongoing work that we are doing in community networks, which I thought we would have heard about before, and thereby building on community resilience. So for delivery across the whole thing, we also make sure very much that we don't only have a digital voting, but that we also have actual physical voting, so that we're not excluding anybody. So that is the proposal. Law, are there any questions?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think, Mark, we have a question.
I do. Thank you, Rachel. As you know, I've supported this since I became a councillor. I've been out to the football club in the snow and the Make It Happen conference with all the kids, and driven my wife to become a panellist in one year's voting. I am really, really disappointed at the amount of uptake we get. 295 grown-ups voted last year, 1% of our population. I appreciate the kids got involved as well, and I was there when they did it, so I was happy to help that. I have a real difficulty in saying it's successful and popular if that's the amount of uptake we get from our people. And I'm not knocking you, because I know exactly how much you've knocked yourself out doing this, and those votes must have cost like 10 quid each or something. I don't know what it was, but I really think we need to look at that again. And I think we've got a meeting next week to talk about, you know, the budget for in the time of COVID. I think if we are having projects, when we think about or even suggest in past years spending £10,000 on a water slide or a tightrope walker or something like that, when people are saying already the way we're wasting money, I think we've got a huge public relations problem here. Although I do like the idea of the small budgets for local groups to do things, I think that's a much more useful way of spending the money. I don't think we would get any support in the town. In fact, we get a lot of whatever the opposite of support is if we went ahead or even suggested projects like we've had in the past.
And so if I can just come back on the 295, obviously that is severely, normally we would have a lot more voters. We did stop promoting the voting because unfortunately it did span just as we were locked down, and therefore all of our channels completely moved to pump out useful and helpful information. But yeah, you're absolutely right, 295 just isn't enough. But I think people's focus, including our own, was just, you know, it was absolutely terrible timing.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Rich?
Yeah, hi Rachel, thanks. As always, you do a great job. My big concern at the moment is we haven't made a big decision about our budget yet. I know we don't normally, but these are not normal times. And I would prefer to make a decision about this in another month's time when we've kind of looked at the whole budget and I feel confident about what we can do. We also don't know, you know, what's going to happen COVID-wise. So it seems to me a little bit premature to be doing this, but that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Rich. I've got a blue hand from John.
Yeah. I was just wondering, because I agree with the points made. Would it be a good idea for us just to approve doing it, but not approve the amount? Because then we could have some discretion after we have discussions the amount. Because or do we just not want it? We just want to defer it. Can we just defer it? I don't know what the easiest way to do this procedurally. So I'll take advice on that.
Yeah, that's a great idea, John.
Paul, if you can clarify, please.
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of sense been said around that, hasn't there? I think if we want to defer it, may as well, as Rich suggested, defer the whole thing. What I wasn't clear on what Mark and Rich were saying, were you thinking that both the PB events and the PB town vote would to defer, or were you just saying one of those?
Yeah, I was thinking of both. I mean, you're only deferring the decision by a month, say, or something, until we've looked at the budget and we're happy with it, and then we can move forward. I quite like John's idea that we don't put a number on it for now.
Yeah, and sorry if you're asking me, and if you're asking me as well to reply to that. Yes, I totally agree with that. It's the wrong time to make the decision. We have a meeting shortly, and I see we're amongst friends now. We don't have any other attendees.
There's John Warman here. Watch out.
we have to have a meeting to discuss our budget. And so I think, I'm not saying we're going to talk about austerity, but I think we really, really have to be careful about what we're spending money on. In the times of plenty, we could do some what looked like frivolous projects to many people, and I don't think we can do that now. I don't think we'll get away with it. We've got a big reputational problem there.
Andy, can I just ask, Rachel, are there any implications of delaying it? What would it mean if it was delayed? I mean, the next meeting of this committee is in 2 months' time. There's a council meeting in between, but this committee meets again in roughly 2 months' time.
So normally we get the decision now so that we can start promoting the opportunity to all our community groups, and then they need to go away and they need to think about the any events that they want to do. They have to scope them out, they have to come up with quite a good budget, and they have to apply. And normally that takes us up to the beginning of February. And then we need to get everything in place in order for them to vote in March so that they can access any money and start getting things in place by April. So that's why there is that.
So perhaps just to ensure, is there then any reason why we don't shove the whole programme back, or sorry, forward 2 months, and then councillors can vote on the projects and the budgets when in a more strategic, knowing the strategic financial position?
So we absolutely could do that, but what we would want to try and avoid, if we possibly can, is the bunching of too many events. So we wouldn't really want to have events over a sort of 6-week period in the summer, at the end of the summer, because it's taken everybody time to work up their events, and that's the thinking behind the timetable. So, but you know, we are in extraordinary times.
Absolutely. Sorry, Andy, I think Rich was trying to get.
Yeah, Rich, do you want to come in?
I was really only going to say we are in extraordinary times. I mean, we don't know. April, we might still be in some kind of lockdown. There might not still be any events. So I think we need to be flexible. And I think it's not what we like, obviously, but I do think we need to be flexible on this, and we could push it back a little while, and it might mean that everything just has to go back. But that's what I'd vote for. You know, I'd vote to push this back a bit once we know what the budget is.
So technically, then, what we have is a recommendation from Rich, seconded by Mark, to not move forward with those 2 recommendations and to defer until the next committee meeting.
Can I just clarify, are we deferring it to the next town matters, or are we just deferring it to full council next month?
I suggest we bring it back to this committee.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll second that, or I'll agree to that, propose that, whatever. Yeah.
So Andy, what we have then is a joint amendment proposed by Rich, seconded by Mark, to not move forward with those recommendations and to defer this report until the next committee.
Excellent. Okay. Can I ask all councillors in favour of that amendment, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
We're not using our blue hands now.
Some are, some aren't.
Okay.
You weren't anyway.
Sorry?
You weren't anyway.
I found it.
Right. Can you stop moving? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's majority. That's unanimous, I think. I think that's unanimous.
It is unanimous.
Okay.
That's how you're doing an amendment.
Sorry, Rachel. We love you, and you do.
Yeah, Rachel. Don't think we're having a pop at you. These are unusual times.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel, for the work you put into that, and hopefully we'll get a better result in a couple of months' time. Fantastic. So next item on the
Andy, sorry, Andy Rimpmars wants to say something.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
just
we
a
missed
quick
that.
one. No, we love you, Rachel. Good stuff. But yeah, I wanted to really highlight that Mark really did touch on something there with the not being frivolous and having to rein things in. I think it's going to be really important next year that we, quote unquote, keep it real. And I think that there will be times when it's not, we can't do the fun things, but I think it's really going to be really important. I just wanted to bolster what Mark said. I think people are going to be feeling it next year especially, and we need to be very aware of that and keep things real.
I hope you don't mind if I just come back and say that the events that we're talking about, who were the winners from last year, what are the Children's Festival, Generation Z, their Froome Festival, and their Winter Wonderland. So I would say, as events go, they are good, solid, proper community events, and it would be a shame if we were to lose events like that. But that is, sorry, I hope you don't think that's me saying something I shouldn't. I just wanted to point that out because the events really are based in the community.
Thank you, Rachel. Right, so we will then move on to the next agenda item, which is for decision. Oh, sorry, I've got Anita now waving. Can't hear you, Anita. But you don't appear to be on mute either.
No.
Oh, there you are. That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rachel, just a quick question for you. Are you saying that if we defer this decision for a couple of months, that we're likely to lose those events?
No, I don't think that's what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is it will just put pressure on their time scales as to whether they're going to get funding from us or not. But
okay.
There could be a positive to this. It could mean that events get funding from elsewhere.
Okay.
So, you know.
Okay, so once again, I will try to now move on to the next agenda item, which is for decision a proposal to deliver the resilience work programme whilst the resilience manager is on sabbatical. I think this one is for Peter.
Yes, as you're all aware, Anna has now gone on sabbatical. And very simply, it's important that we keep up the momentum in terms of the work that we're doing. And the proposal in front of you is very simple, which is that we keep Anna's post open, but we move to recruit a resilience officer who can keep that momentum up, and that you delegate authority to me to get on with the job of recruitment and prepare a job description and person specifications as part of that. So it's very straightforward, but I guess there may be some questions on this.
Thanks, Peter. I'll go to Rich, then Ali, then Mark, please.
Fully support both proposals. Can we go to a vote now?
Ali?
I was just going to clarify that we have already voted that there was going to be another community projects officer, wasn't there, working? So yeah, I would say the same. Let's go and vote. Without too much discussion.
Sorry, Ali. Mark?
I'm totally happy to recruit somebody for the year to replace Anna because that takes her salary. What happens in ongoing years, then that's another salary we have to find. Did we already budget for that? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what my point of clarification was, that actually we have already voted, haven't we, that there was another salary? Is that right, Peter?
Paul, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah. What the proposal here is nothing about a community project officer. It's to recruit a new permanent resilience officer.
Sorry, but I've got the name wrong. But in theory, we have already voted that that was going to happen anyway before Anna went on sabbatical.
No, we didn't. If you remember the first council meeting of the lockdown. I think it was back in March. We presented or proposed a community action plan with an investment in that to recruit a resilience officer. What we're doing, and that decision was deferred, Ali, so it wasn't taken, and it's not in the yeah, it's not in the budget this year. However, there is the vacant post that Anna has left temporarily that is in the budget. So to answer Mark's question, we have sufficient budget this year to cover this, and because it's a permanent post, you would need to agree that that is a permanent post subject to what's it called, probationary period, and you would need to pay this in next year's budget. The slightly helpful thing is that 6 months into the new financial year, Anna's post will still be vacant. So the salary bill in this area would only kick in 1 year's time from now, but you would need to budget for that come January for the new financial year. Ali, is that, have I made it even worse now?
No, you've made it clear. Great, thanks, Paul.
So I've got Paul, then John, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I support this. I think it's probably the most pragmatic way to go about this going forward. My just a quick question was, because the proposed new recruit will be on a lower grade and therefore a lower salary, will that mean that there's actually a saving by paying someone a lower salary as opposed to Anna's salary over the rest of this financial year?
Peter, do you want to come in?
I think yes, that's clear, actually.
Do we know how much?
I suppose very much depends on the scale at which the new officer starts. I mean, we would expect them to start at the lower end of the grade, but of course, subject to experience, we may choose to offer the post at a higher scale. So, Paul, maybe you can add to that.
I think kind of being sensitive to the discussion we just had about the PB, I think Peter and I would want to recruit and probably recruit at very low at the scale, because we're in interesting times. The other thing to consider, of course, is that the saving wouldn't be as great as we would expect normally because Anna worked part-time. So what Peter and I and Sarah have been thinking is that we've got a budget that we were paying Anna, and we would ensure that it certainly wouldn't go over that budget, and we would try to maximise the savings. We can't give you a precise answer for the reasons Peter gave, Paul.
Thank you. So I've got John and Anita, please.
Yeah, for me, it's quick. I support these recommendations. I think we should go to a vote. My only thing would be to alert Peter in terms of developing an appropriate job description and person specification. It would be good if councillors could have purview on that, because we're thinking forward about what other things that we as a council might like to do. And there's this role with the river work, which is going to be coming up and building and some sort of liaising. If we could have some purview and some input to that job description, it'd be great. But otherwise, I support these.
Paul?
Yeah. Let's not forget, John, that this post is to cover the duties in part that Anna's vacated. It proves very, very difficult to draft a job description by committee. I can certainly send it to one or two councillors for review, but I think will do.
Thank you. So Anita and then Rob, and then we're going to have to go to the vote because it's getting nearly midnight.
Yeah, Thanks, Andy. Just a quick thought. I know this is a really tricky one, isn't it? Because I guess we're working on the basis that Anna will come back, but we have to bear in mind that she may not. So my question is really, is it feasible to employ somebody on a 12-month contract, or do we have to employ them as a permanent contract? Or can that be reviewed at a later stage? I'm not quite sure where we sit with this and what options we've got, really.
Paul?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Anita, and we've sort of thought long and hard about this. The proposal to recruit a permanent post stems from the fact that we got the very clear impression that if you'd have been able to approve the Climate Emergency Action Plan and the new proposed permanent post, then you would want to do that. And that's what this proposal is based on. If Anna comes back, as I said, we would need to allocate the half a year's salary to Anna in addition to this permanent post. If Anna doesn't come back, then, you know, financially we're laughing, but we haven't got the staff that we were hoping to have on this budget, this area of work back in March. The reason we're proposing permanent as opposed to a contract basis is more on the basis of a permanent post is a much more attractive post, and the pool will be wider, and our chances of getting a high quality, high caliber member of staff would be far greater than they would be on a 12-month contract, because everyone would be looking for a new job after the first 6 months.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Then Rob, then please.
Yes, so when we've had discussions about this, there was one particular aspect of Anna's capabilities that would clearly needs to be taken into account, which is her great ability in fundraising. And I'm just wondering whether you anticipate this new resilience officer doing that. I mean, obviously it'd be great if she could, or you have other plans.
Do you want me to come back on that one, Andy?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I mean, what Peter didn't say was we're also wanting a nuclear physicist in this job description as well, you know, and a brain surgeon. Sorry, Rob, that was a bit flippant, but I think no is the answer. What you as councillors will be receiving from Peter, Sarah, and myself next week is, as part of the budget forecast for the rest of this year, is to allocate some funding for an internal fundraiser. So that area of work that Anna has done and Kate is doing very successfully as well, can be hived off into an internal fundraiser to make sure those bases are covered. I think it would be too much to expect this post we want them to hit the ground running, but if they've got too much to carry, I think they'll just fall over.
Lovely, thank you, Paul, and everyone for comments. So I'm assuming on that basis that we don't have any amendments. So can we get a proposer for the recommendation as stated, please? Anne, seconder Rich. All those councillors in favour, please. You're on mute, Paul.
I always tat at everyone else when they do that. That was unanimous, I think. Anyone disagree with that? No, that was unanimous then.
Excellent, thank you. And so then we'll come on to the last agenda item. Thank you for your patience, Kate, which is for information, an overview of the community development work over the last 6 months and an outline of the next steps.
So I made the fatal mistake of celebrating the fact that I didn't have the Twilight slot tonight. And it's gone way beyond Twilight now, so I'll be really, really quick. And this will primarily, I think this should be an opportunity for you to ask any questions. And maybe at some point we'll find an opportunity to showcase some of our work in a bit more detail so you can understand it a bit better. So you've got the paper that puts the bones of it there. We were successful in lottery funding, which gave us an opportunity to really respond to an increasing need prior to COVID to support neighbourhood networks and the street groups that were popping up all over town. But then obviously COVID-19 came around the corner and way more street networks and neighbourhood groups have popped up all over the place, really extraordinarily successfully. And we're hearing stories all the time about how people are linking with their neighbours that they haven't done previously, and the support mechanisms that just a simple WhatsApp group can provide. So, you know, there's huge amounts happening across the town and some really phenomenal stories. Maybe we'll send you a summary of some of those stories. So, yeah, Hannah Stopford has been seconded across to that role for a 6-month period, which was the duration of the lottery funding, and we're due to meet with them again in November to look at continuation funding, which is great. That's given us extra capacity, and we will be looking to backfill Hannah in the next few months with an extension on Jess's maternity leave. So she'll be going on maternity leave in January, and actually her contract comes to an end in July. So we'll be just advertising for a short period for that maternity cover. And but in the meantime, Hannah's been doing a lot of support for the neighbourhood network, but not exclusively. So we know that there are lots of groups out there that want to be part of a bigger network, but they also want to be part of doing lots of other things. So we're looking at lots of creative ways of working across all of our areas of work in the town council. So Window Wonderland, the work around the tree project, and making sure that streets and neighbourhood groups can be involved in that, old neighbourhood groups and new ones that have popped up, and finding lots of mechanisms for us to be able to talk to them. So Hannah's doing a sterling job out and about, talking to people, finding out what it is that we can do to support them in terms of the town council, but also how can they support each other. They're providing a really, really critical role at the moment in the town. And as we've heard, you know, we know that people are experiencing really significant difficulties, and that's changed a lot over the last 6 months. But we heard from other town councils and even district and county councils across the country that they were seeing a much bigger demand for the emergency services that they had set up, so like food parcel deliveries, etc., than we were experiencing. And many of them wondered if that was because we had done so much support at the beginning of lockdown around the neighbourhood groups and the networks, and encouraging people to check in with their 5 nearest neighbours. So there's a lot for us to do to find out and get a bit more data around that and put a bit more meat on the bones. But, you know, for us to move forward really in that trajectory of supporting streets to come together to get to know each other, sometimes that is slightly frivolous, but we know that the rewards later are enormous. So I'll send you a summary of some of the stories, but are there any questions?
Any questions for Kate, please?
It's not a question, it's an observation. I was with Peter on the Academy of Urbanists last week, and the one thing that they saw about the change in Frome from when the award was won 5 years ago and now was our community development work. So that's going to be a really strong theme of our presentation to them in November, and really centering on our ability to turn on the head of a pin when COVID-19 struck was all of the great work that you've been doing over the last however many years, Kate, which enabled those community networks and all of our community groups to respond so quickly in COVID-19. So it might appear frivolous, but those networks are so strong and so important when a crisis hits. So it's not frivolous at all.
Thanks, Anne. Any other questions or comments for Kate?
Scott's got his hand up, Andy.
Oh, Scott, sorry.
No problem. So yeah, the work that has been done is fantastic, and I don't think anyone will ever dispute that. and as Anne says, the response, especially on a community level, which has been sort of, it's been this seed that Kate and the people she's worked with they planted it before we even knew COVID would ever be an issue, and it's grown into this great, community-based plant that is helping people. I'd be very interested, as you mentioned, you've got a lot of positive feedback. I'd be very interested to see the levels of feedback in the sort of southeast of Frome at my end, the mountain and High Point and those sort of areas, because I'm very active in the area and I'm not quite seeing that good stuff making its way sort of into those further reaches yet. So it'd be great to, if you have got sort of information that will, set me straight and put me back in my corner, fantastic, 2 thumbs up. But if there isn't as much as you're seeing in other areas, it'd be great to sort of, have a conversation about that and just see how we can make that happen. Really.
Definitely. And, we know from previously, the conversation we had, I think probably about a year ago, actually, when we had a similar conversation, that Stonebridge isn't particularly well served with street networks either. And we were maybe expecting to see more pop up over this last sort of 3-4 month period, and we haven't in Stonebridge as well. But I know that Hannah has met with 3 or 4 groups, Scott, in your area. So they may have come together for other purposes, but they've used those networks to support each other in the last few months. So we can definitely give you some feedback on that.
Yeah, and it'd be great to sort of get introduced to those people as well. I may already know them and they may already know me, but we might not realise that we're all doing the same thing.
And I think one of the things we're really acutely aware of is that there's likely to be loads more groups out there and little networks of neighbours that have tapped into each other that haven't identified themselves with us because there hasn't been a need to, or they haven't felt it's appropriate. So there's lots, and hence the work around Window Wonderland and Hannah getting involved in that. We just want to put the feelers out and find out really what's going on the ground out there without people necessarily having to sign up to a formal network with regular meetings and something more than just the power of a local WhatsApp group is enormous. They don't necessarily need to link in at many other levels. So there's all sorts of bits for us to make sure we do across that.
Cool, good stuff. Thank you.
But get in touch, Scott, and prompt me.
Brilliant, thank you. Any more questions or comments? Andy?
Can we get you on first next time?
I normally quite like it, but actually when we're on screen, it's just more and more exhausting.
Andy,
Yeah, I just want to say big thumbs up, amazing work. Yeah, just good stuff. Just a big pat on the back, really.
Excellent.
Here, Kate. Here.
Thanks as always, Kate. The work you do is unbelievable, to be honest, and the effort that goes into it is, I can't say enough about it. And having sat down with you and gone through the Trinity data that time to understand what it is you're trying to do is fantastic. So thank you for your efforts and ongoing.
Well, and Hannah Stopford really needs to take the credit for a lot of the work in the last couple of months. She's just stepped into hit the ground running on that.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, I think Hannah's gone. Otherwise, we'd be saying the same.
Her daughter woke her up at 4 o'clock this morning, and I think she just reached a point where she wouldn't have made any sense. So apologies.
I know what that's like. Right. So on that note, unless there's any other business, I will bring this meeting to a close. So thank you very much.
Well chaired, Andy. Well done.
Yep.
Well done, Andy. Not easy.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye all.